Hi, good morning. It's I see some people have dropped a couple of focal in the chat there. It is shocked in the Gaeilge, so fáilte romh agus Eve. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. So I'm the Literacy Development and Outreach Worker with NALA. You're really welcome to today's workshop about using plain English in your organisation. And this is specifically for organisations working in the community and voluntary sector. You might be a charity or an NGO. And we really appreciate you all. There's so many people here. It's brilliant taking the time to come and to learn more about using plain English. So whether today's content is brand new or a bit of a refresher, we'll hope you find it very useful and practical. So for us in NALA, using plain English is just one part of what we call a literacy-friendly approach. And this simply is just being aware and understanding of people with unmet literacy needs, the barriers they might face, and how you can actively try and remove them so they can use your program, services, groups, projects more easily. So we hope today that you might start after this, start the conversation about literacy in your organisation, or continue one if it's something you do talk about regularly. From the research, we know many adults in Ireland are not confident reading and understanding information, like, for example, nutritional information on a yogurt packet, or even dosage on the back of a medicine packet. So we think there's around 1 in 6 people from the research. So there's quite a lot of people out there that you may be coming across in your organisations. We know that inequality and literacy are very much linked, and those that are adults with unmet literacy needs tend to have faced marginalisation in their younger years and maybe continue today. So lots of links with poverty and lack of supports, growing up maybe in a low income households. So for you as community and voluntary organisations, you're very much a lifeline to many people in different communities. You provide support, information, advice. And so people will feel comfortable talking to you about sensitive issues such as literacy, and they may say something to you about their reading, their writing, or how comfortable they are with those. So this often puts you in that position of making a good referral or being able to have a supportive conversation about literacy with someone. So beyond today's workshop, we can offer 1-hour literacy awareness or literacy friendly workshops for your organizations. I can do that with you for free. We're also piloting literacy ambassador programs. So this is where we do a series of understanding and literacy awareness workshops with a community group who would have experienced educational disadvantage. And the idea is that we explore literacy together, and then they go out into their own communities and start conversations about learning as an adult and literacy. So please do follow up with me afterwards. I'll leave my details if you want to explore some of that with your organisation. Please do fill out the feedback survey that Sean will send to you after today's session. It really helps us to know what we can do for you in terms of resources, further training, any of the things that you're not feeling confident in relation to communications or being literacy friendly. So please do fill out that feedback survey. It really helps us tailor things. I've done Sean's training before. He's an excellent trainer. He's trained literally thousands of people in Ireland working in the public sector in lots of organisations like the HSC and TUSLA, loads of private organisations, finance, insurance, legal, you name it. And of course, with community and voluntary organisations and NGOs like yourself. So, soak it up, ask questions. And, it's all about small changes, small steps to big changes. So, Rome wasn't built in a day, but as you adopt and integrate some of the practices and practical tips that Sean will share with you, it'll really make a difference with how you engage with the public. So I will leave it there and hand over back to Sean.
Thank you so much, Derv. Covered so much there. Thank you so much. Yeah, so folks, I'm going to share my screen with you all, and then we're going to get started. So give that a minute. So just tell me in the chat box, everyone, that you can see that. Just say, yes, I can see it. It'd be great. Yeah, perfect. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to try to live up to that introduction. So thanks, Derv. So folks, for the session, if you want to ask a question, You can put it in the chat box, or you can raise your hand using the raise your hand icon. That is just on the kind of toolbar. Try to give you questions to the end. I'm going to try to make it interactive, but we do have time at the end for some questions. So I'm going to introduce myself a little bit. So I work in NALA. As the plain English editor and trainer, and I train organizations all around the country. And basically, my job is to help organizations improve their communications and use the plain English guidelines. And I love when people feel empowered to use plain English. So, whether you're writing an email or whether you're writing a report or whether you're talking, like directly to a service user or writing directly for a service user, the plain English guidelines can help you keep your message clear. So that's me, folks. So what I wanted to do in this workshop is just review the plain English guidelines. So I sent you on an email yesterday with some material, and say we're just gonna look at it in more depth. I want to make it very, very practical, folks. So I don't want this to just be something that washes over you. I want to make it very, very practical, and I want to boost your confidence with advocating for plain English and using plain English skills and the techniques. So let's just review the plain English principles really quickly. Um, so in the bid, folks, to make this interactive, I have here a definition of plain English, okay? But I've taken some words out because I want you to think about, what would be a good definition of plain English, okay? So this is from the Plain Language Association International, one of the international organizations who advocate for plain language. So when you talk about writing in plain language, you are part of an international movement for clarity. So I've taken out some words. So let's see if we can do it together. So communication. So any sort of communication you're having with a service user is in plain language. If it's W, it's S, and it's D are so clear that the intended audience can easily find what they need, what they find, and then that information. So what would you say the first three are, folks? Anyone want to put in the chat box what they think the first three are? So communication is plain language. If it's W, it's S, and it's D are so clear the intended audience can easily find what they need. What would the first one be? Have a think about it and put in the chat box. Yeah, the words, the first one. So words, wording, yeah. What would the S and the D be? Syntax, yeah, it's a good idea, but it's not syntax. Structure, yeah, we're getting there, folks. So the wording, the structure, and the D, think about how we present things. So it's wording and structure, and the D, yeah, the design. Perfect, we're getting there, folks. So communication is in plain language. If it's wording, its structure and design are so clear. You want those three things to be so clear. The wording, the structure, and design are so clear that the intended audience, your intended reader, can easily find what they need. Then what are they going to do with that information, folks? What are they going to do with what they find? What's the U? Yeah, they're going to understand what they find, and then what are they going to do after that? We're not giving people information that's in the background. So we're giving them information that they can use. Exactly. People wrote it there. Perfect. So way to think about it, folks, is plain language is not just the words we choose to use. It's how we structure them, how we design them so they're as easy as possible for people to read, And then when you've designed it, when you have it together, you want people to be able to find what they need, whether they're scanning for it, then understand what they find, and then to be able to use that information, because you want people to be so active and you want your information to, help people make decisions in their lives. Okay. So when you work in plain language, folks, you hear these kind of myths, and you might hear these myths when you're trying to advocate for plain language in your job. Okay, so I want to try to kind of combat them. Okay, so people will say, "Oh, plain English is just dumbing down your message, or it's just patronizing your reader, or it's changing the meaning of what you're saying." Or it's only using short words and sentences, or it's destroying the beauty of language. Okay. So to combat those things, what we want to say is that, it's not dumbing down your message, it's helping people, helping it make it more accessible, helping more people understand what you're actually trying to get across. Okay. It's not patronizing your reader, it's recognizing that people are very busy or very stressed or in a very difficult life situation. So you want to make it as easy as possible for the communication to get across. It's not changing the meaning of what you're saying. So, in our work, folks, often we have to like translate like legislation into, plain language. So we have to work very, very hard to do that. You don't want to change the meaning. You don't want to create any ambiguity between what's in the legislation and what's in your material. So you have to work really, really hard to do that. Okay. It's not only using short words and sentences. Short words and sentences are part of it. But if you just do that, you're making it easier, but you're not getting to the heart of the matter. The heart of the matter is thinking, what's the reader's needs? Always be thinking, how do I make it easy for my reader? Don't put the organization's needs first. And then some people sometimes say, it's destroying the beauty of language. Well, yeah, I see what their points, but what I think about that, it's you want to find the elegance in simplicity. Okay, so having a complicated message and explaining as simply as possible without changing the meaning, there's a beauty in that, I find. There's an elegance and simplicity. Okay. So if there was one guides that I wanted you to walk away from the training session having a great understanding of, folks, it would be our checklist for documents. So I'm going to point to that and say it covers language, it covers structure, and it covers design. Okay, but we're going to go through that in more detail with some examples. So I'm not going to go through that in depth now. I'm going to show you some examples and we're going to go through it. Okay. If I break it down to the top 6 tips, so when I'm doing a 1-hour workshop for your organization or a different organization, I break it down into the top 6 tips, which is imagine your readers, speak directly to them. So what happens is people don't have a clear idea of who they're writing for and they kind of write very abstractly. But if you have a clear idea of who you're writing for and you speak directly to them, that gets to the heart of plain language. Then using the active voice. Well, what does that mean? It means instead of saying a letter was sent in the post, it means that you will receive a letter. It kind of makes it active so that you're not using passive language and you're using more active language. We're going to look at that in more detail, folks. It's about using the inverted pyramid writing. It's almost thinking like a journalist. You're trying to find what the key points is and trying to bring that to the top. And it's the key point for your reader, not for the organization. What's the key point for your reader? Then again, structure, folks. White space, headings, and bullets will make things so much easier to read using everyday words. So we can all use complicated jargon or complicated technical words, but we want to try to, refrain from using them and use them sparingly. So you want to use everyday words to engage your readers. And then, keeping sentences short. So a useful limit is 15 to 20 words. Doesn't mean every sentence has to be 15 or 20 words. You can have a short sentence or a longer sentence depending on what the flow is, but you want to keep things on average 15 to 20 words. Okay. And as Derv said at the start, you know, a person's literacy skills, are a better predictor of a person's health status and age, race, or socioeconomic status. That comes from the American Medical Association. In NALA, we say that literacy changes lives because literacy gets to the heart of everything. So you want people to, improve their skills, but we want organizations to be accessible. Okay. Um, as part of helping people to improve their skills, folks, here's just a bit of background about literacy. There's a government commitment to a 10-year strategy called the ALL strategy. Maybe we have some regional coordinators here with us today, but just giving you a bit of background about that. And yeah, there's Minister Harris and Silas are kind of leading on it, and we're being part of it, this kind of literacy strategy. And you'll see here there's a very important point about literacy among adults. It's that the minister says we know there are too many people who cannot read, who cannot write an email and make a bank transfer. This is not a failure of the person, but a failure by the state. So part of the mission is ending that stigma. So if people want to go back to education, improve their skills, they're empowered to do it. And the organizations have a role to make their information as easy as possible for everyone. Okay, Durav has already kind of done these stats a little bit, so I will just go through them real quickly. So the stats, folks, in terms of literacy are that 1 in 6 adults are at level 1 literacy. What does level 1 mean? Well, level 3, folks, is your junior cert. So just think about that. Level 3 is your junior cert. When you pass your junior cert, you're considered to be functionally literate. So according to a big European-wide survey of 7,000 people in Ireland, 1 in 6 people are at level 1 literacy. Then the issue is a bit bigger. For numeracy, it's 1 in 4. Then for technology, it's 2 in 5. So just a bit of background about literacy. We're hoping for new figures in 2024. This survey happens every 10 years. Yeah, so that should be interesting. Okay, reference guides, folks. So there's two main places you can go. There's lots of places you can go for reference guides. I'm just going to point you towards two. I'm going to send you these after the session as well. If you're looking for a refresher on grammar and how to present things in clear writing, there's a resource called the Plain English Style Guide for the Public Service, which we published with Deeper a few years ago. So I'm going to send you a link to that. It's a good guide. And then the National Disability Authority, they have a toolkit called the Customer Communications Toolkit for Public Service, and that covers written, spoken, and signed and digital communications. So when I have a question about how to do something, places I go are the style guides for the public service and the toolkit. So if you're writing for the public, folks, there are two great resources that can inform what you're doing. Okay, so I'm going to give you links to them after the session. Yeah, people always love design, okay, because design is so visual, okay, and so immediate, okay. So what I want you to think about, folks, is I want you thinking constructively here. I want you to think about what's making this difficult to read, because if we can figure out what's making it difficult to read, we can change it. Okay. Yeah. So here is just a web page from a GP's in the UK. And if you click on that if you open that web page, folks, and you're looking for services from your local GP, what's making that hard to read? So your task is, folks, in the chat box, what are 3 things that are not working in that on that web page? And try to be very specific, please. Yeah, thanks, folks. I know we have a lot of people here, but it's great to read so many people's thoughts. And when you're doing thinking, it's great. Yeah, so we have different colors, very distracting. We've kind of too many links that are not accessible. Center text, no consistency in color scheme. What is the vital information? You know? Yeah, good work, folks. So, you can be providing many, many services and they can all be excellent. But if you're not presenting them well through your website, then you're going to miss out and your service users are going to miss out. Okay, so structure and design, so important how we do things. Okay, so that's just an example. Okay, I want to look at an example of some design wins, if that makes sense. So design wins. So in my work, I'm very fortunate that I get to work with lots of different organizations all across the country. And yeah, when I come across something that I think is really strong, I like to share it. So this was a leaflet that was put together by the HSC about local health services. Okay, so you'll see that's a kind of what's it called, a bifold. So this is the front page on the right, and this is the back page on the left. So I just want you to take a minute, folks, just to take it in. You're not going to read every word, but I just want you to take in how the design is helping the delivery of information. Okay, so that's the front page, but I want to look at the middle. So take a minute, folks. Take a few minutes. Have a look at this and identify what's strong about how they're presenting the information here. So what's strong about how they're presenting this information? Yeah, so much great thoughts coming in, folks. Excellent. Just gonna have a look through some of them. People talking about the colors, people talking about the white space, use of visuals, icons relate to the info. Yeah. The font is a bit small. That's true. That could just be the nature of the PowerPoint, but that's true. The font is a bit small there. Um, can anyone point out to me the in design, folks, sometimes color can be overused, but I want you to look at how they're using color there. What's going on with the color? Can anyone explain to me what's going on with the color? Yeah, use of gradients, escalation. That's a nice way to put it. Yeah, so it goes the escalation. So it goes from the calming colors of, teal and blue to injuries being orange and emergencies being red. And sometimes you don't even register that, but it's there. So I think good design should be almost invisible. It should support what you're trying to do, rather than being showy. Because I think when design is showy, it takes away from the message. So use design to support it. Great. And any other points I want to raise about this? Yeah, so the use of bold is interesting. That was one thing I'm not sure I agree too much about with because see whether they're bolding hse.ie 3 times. Like for me, should we be bolding maybe a key service we can do online rather than bolding the website? But that would just be my editorial brain thinking like so they're being consistent with bolds, like they're bolding contact information, but generally bold inside sentences can be a little bit distracting. So you want to use it quite sparingly. This could be an attempt at CEO tactics. Hmm. I think because it's a print leaflet, though, Philip. I'm not sure about that, but yeah, that's what SEO sometimes does, doesn't it? Okay. Um, So I just wanted to point it out, folks, as you know, good practice is going on all across the country, and I think that is an example of design done well and design used to support information. Okay, let's keep rolling along. Yeah, so what we're going to do, folks, is we're going to do a couple of very interactive sections about, you know, what makes things plain language, okay? Part of being a good writer using plain language is being able to spot what makes things hard for your reader, okay? So you want to get into that mindset of what makes things hard for the reader, okay? So one of my heroes is called Brian A. Garner. He's a plain English and legal expert, and he has this quote about changing your mindset. And he talks about that good writing makes the reader's job easy, and then bad writing makes it hard for your reader. And that all the way through the process, good writers have cultivated an abiding empathy for their readers. So I think that's a key point, abiding empathy. All the way you're thinking, what are my readers' needs? Okay. So Brian A. Garner, worth a follow on Twitter or Mastodon or wherever you are. I'm not sure he's on Instagram, but there we go. Let's look at an example from the government. Okay. So I like this example and I use it a bit. I think the government have improved it since, but let's just look at it. Okay. So that abiding empathy, folks. I want you to imagine that you're a parent and that you learn that's been a decision to expel your child from school. You know, very difficult life situation. So stressful, so scary. What's going on? What's happening? Where do I go for support? One of the places you can go for support is the official website, the Government of Ireland, gov.ie, and you can look at their webpage here. You type into Google how to appeal against, my child being expelled, and you get this page. So just look at the title of it: Appeals against expulsion or suspension for a period or periods totaling not less than 20 school days in a school year. Very, very long title. Okay, and you get to the anchor links. And you see the anchor links, and they're trying to break it down into chunks, which is great. Chunks are very, very helpful. But let's look at the very top of the page, okay? I want you to have a quick read of that, folks. And I want you to tell me, stepping into the shoes of the reader, what's making this hard to understand? Yeah, so starting with legislation, it's an interesting choice. It's an interesting choice. Let's just think about that, okay? There's different needs going on here, okay? Different needs going on here. Um, why? Why is the writer is a person who works for the Department of Education. Why are they beginning? Why are they beginning with the legislation? Why are they doing that? Yeah, they're coming from a legal standpoint. They think that's the most important, you know? Um, and I think gets to the heart of it, where the writer thinks that the law is the most important thing, but I would think that the law should support the human elements rather than the law coming before the human elements. So I think that the second paragraph that they have, to make an appeal, you must complete this form for expulsion or suspension, is maybe a better way to lead with it, and then put the law down to the bottom. So that's one of the things I think about our work in the charity and voluntary sector is that, we, help people enact their rights. We help people act upon their rights. But if we begin with the legislation, if we begin with that, to a degree, we might lose people. So the idea is, under the law you have these rights, okay, but you don't need to go into the ever section of the Education Act. So I would restructure it, just to put the key information first. So there it is, just a bit bigger, and just to restructure it, so how to appeal. So to appeal against a decision, you must complete and return the form. Please return the form within by post or email within 42 days, and then putting the section 29 further down because it's important. You want people to be informed about what their rights are, but is the most important thing for that stressed parent in that moment? I I don't think so. So just if we are thinking about our reader and we restructure things to put the key message first for our reader, that can make a big difference. And again, folks, going back to the like the 1 in 6 who I mentioned earlier who, may have unmet literacy needs. It can be difficult to skim and scan information when you have unmet literacy needs. So not putting the key message first can make things a bit more difficult. Um, let's dig into this, folks. Let's dig into this, okay? We're going to look at the appeals process in detail, okay? So this is the part where you're kind of sharpening your plain English awareness because you're looking at what makes things difficult, okay? So I want you to have a quick read of this, and then I want you to be very specific about what's making this hard to read. So in the chat box, just have a quick read about what's making this hard to read. So take your time, folks. Really dig into the language and the structure of it. Great work, folks. Yeah. People being very specific about the use of the passive voice, about long sentences, about repetition, about lack of bullet points, about legalese, too many numbers, no spaces, too many requests altogether. Yeah, yeah. I love when we have lots of people because people pick up things like the last sentence in the first paragraph is over 40 words. Yeah. A good few words could be deleted without losing meaning. Excellent. Yeah. In a training session, someone once said to me, plain language is a way to say more with fewer words, which I liked. I stole. So I think that's a good way to look at it. So let's make this really practical, folks. Let's make this really practical. Let's let's imagine that this is our content. Let's imagine we own this, okay? Just to practice the plain language skills, okay? Let's also imagine that we've explained some of the complicated jargon earlier on the web page. So I want you to be the person who's writing this. I want you to be the person who's responsible for this process. You are the administration unit. So I want you to use we. I want you to use we, and I want you to use you. Okay. So in the chat box, folks, take a minute and then rewrite the first sentence as plainly as possible using we and using you, and just try to get straight to the point. Just do the first sentence for me. So can you rewrite the first sentence for me in plain language? Excellent. Good work, folks. Give you another 30 seconds. Excellent. Great. So lots of great examples in the chat box, folks. I always love how you always get great responses, and they're always a little bit different. So we analyzed even just the first sentence, folks. Following receipt of your, so receipt of in the checklist, the plain English checklist, it's what we call an abstract noun. So what you want to do is if you have an abstract noun, you want to turn it into a verb, which you all did very naturally there. People were changing it to after we receive, or after receiving, or when we receive. So that's the principle of following, using more everyday words, so after, shorter. Receipt of, turn it into a verb after we receive. Excellent. Um, and then a lot of people got rid of Section 29 appeal form because we said it probably earlier. We don't need to repeat it again, or documentation, and then using Section 29 appeals administration unit, using we, because let's take ownership of it. And then, folks, what I'd ask you is that if you delete or you get rid of needless complexity, and you don't let it clog up your writing, what would be the one maybe challenging term or concept that might need a bit of explanation in the first sentence? Like what would be scary for the parent? hearing, So I think hearing in the first sentence, but we kind of lose hearing the way it's written now because there's so much other jargon being used, that hearing kind of gets even lost. Excellent. So what we can do, folks, oh, that's excellent. So that's the first sentence. Um, let's look at the last sentence, folks. Okay, let's look at the last sentence. So where it says, all information received will be shared with both parties to the appeal and the appeals committee at least 3 days prior to the hearing. Okay, what I want you to do, folks, is I want you to put that into the active voice. This is not, it sounds complicated, but it's not. Okay, so in this sentence, the last sentence, we have a construction here called the passive voice, which is will be shared. Okay, will be shared. Because we don't know who's doing the sharing, you know? In the active voice, you say that the appeals unit or the appeals administration unit, or in the case of we're owning this content, we're going to say we. Okay, so I want you to start with we and just put that into the active voice for me. Just do the last sentence for me, folks, about put that into the active voice. Try to start with the we. Excellent work, folks. Yeah, have a go at it. Good work. Excellent. I love the way people do it a little bit differently. Good. Excellent. Okay. Excellent, folks. Great work, everyone. So what we can do when we're analyzing things like this, and part of our jobs part of our jobs is, advocating for plain language and then, translating sometimes what the government will put in, a circular, Department of Education circular, or put in legislation into plain language. So I think it's good to practice these kind of editing skills as well. Um, So when we're looking for these things, folks, you want to look out for like abstract nouns following receipt of, okay? Very vague language. A notification will also issue. Like, what does that mean? Like, notification will also issue. You're going to write me a letter. Then you want to watch out for needless legal formalities, like the school in question. That creates a tone of, maybe it's unnecessary tone. Can we be neutral? I think this crosses over into being a bit more than neutral, almost threatening or overwhelming, with language like the appellant and the school in question. 46-word sentences someone picked out. You want to avoid long sentences. You want to avoid the passive voice. You want to avoid words with simpler alternatives, which you all put into before. So, your brains, folks, are the best things to help analyze text, and reader experience. You can also use tools like the Hemingway editor. So the Hemingway editor, folks, is a free online readability checker. And what it does is it shows you where your very long sentence, where your very long and difficult sentences are in red, where your difficult sentences are in yellow, shows you where your passive voice is in the green, shows you phrases with easier alternatives like prior to, and then it shows you your adverbs. Okay, why does it pick on adverbs? Well, if you look at the sentence here, it's talking about the form being fully completed. So the question you ask yourself is, what's the difference between fully completed and completed? There's no real difference. There might be a difference in emphasis, but if you just say completed, you're shortening it. Normally, well, they're putting in normally to give themselves a bit of a hedge, to give themselves some wiggle room. If we wanted to be more specific and precise, maybe we could get rid of the normally, but we understand why it's there. What the Hemming editor also does is it gives you a grade score. So it shows up here that this is a grade score of 12. Well, what does this mean? Well, this is based on the US system, folks. So you want to aim for grade 8 or grade 9. That is your kind of junior cert level, grade 8 or grade 9. And when we talk about writing plain language, if you want to aim for a general audience, you want to aim for a curious teenager. So you're aiming for that kind of curious teenager who's, maybe 15 years old, doesn't want to be patronized, doesn't want to be talked down to, but wants to get, all the meaning. And then if there's any technical terms, you want them explained to them. Yeah, so that's the Hemingway editor, folks. Does anyone use it in the chat box, folks? Anyone use the Hemming editor or like it, or is it new to you? Anyone like it? Anyone don't like it? Amy, you like it? Okay. Yeah, so you just go to Hemingway app, or that's the web page, okay? And you can download it. The tools are there to help us, but you want to have the skills ourselves. So, a tool like this can help you if you're not feeling confidence, but you want to boost your own confidence. Yeah, so I think they can be very helpful. Yeah, I didn't know it was free for nonprofits. That would be something to look into. Thank you so much for sharing that, Renee. Yeah. So, what I want you to do, folks, is I want you to just have a read of my suggested. Oh, Someone asked a question about hearing first, which I think is interesting. No, but I'll answer it next here. So, folks, have a quick read of that suggested plain English edit. It's only a start, but the question is, what techniques are we using to make it a bit easier to read? Yeah. So the use of we, explaining what hearing is, using more paragraphs, using shorter sentences, trying to be clearer with the dates, being a bit more concise. But someone made the point, yeah, so that makes a difference. So in terms of the language we're using, that makes a difference, makes the process easier to follow. Um, so we made a point about bullet points. Maybe bullet points could work, but I want you to think about this a bit more, folks. Okay, this is a process. Okay, what jumps out at you about a process? Um, like if we were to reimagine this, what could we do instead of just making it text and paragraphs? Steps in a process, exactly, a flow chart. So we often talk about content design. You hear that word a lot, like user experience and content design. So plain language can be part of it. And then you'll think about, okay, what's the best way to organize this content? Well, step-by-step instructions, maybe using images to support it if that's possible. So plain language will get you so far, make things easier to act upon, and then you'll think about the other elements. Okay. What I often think about as well is that plain language leads to plain thinking. Like if you are reading something like this is hard for, you know, like a legal minded person. They have to kind of wade through this and they have to kind of process it. But the idea about plain language would be to make it as easy to process as possible. And then you can think about how we can support it with better design. So I'm delighted. So with the Hemingway editor, if we put it in, we can see that it gets a great score of 9. You might have a long sentence, and then I thought, oh, I didn't delete the fully, so let's delete the fully. Um, and if the Hemingway editor shows you have a hard sentence, well, it can help you identify, okay, why am I still using this? Maybe I should explain this earlier. It just helps you like sharpen your eye. Again, it's just a tool to help. Um, what I'm delighted about is that we did an open training session. We have like 5 or 6 of them a year, where we do 4 hours of training, and we make it very practical, and we tailor it for an organization. We tailor it for the participants' documents. And one of the people who came along was actually working on a document like this, which is from the Children's Rights Alliance, and it was a guide to reduce timetables. So what I'm going to do, folks, is I'm going to really quickly open this up, and I'm going to show it to you. I'm actually going to put it in the chat box as well, just because I think this is really good. So uh, in the chat box, folks, you'll be able to open this, but I want you to go, or you can look at the screen, to page 8. Yeah, so it's on the screen, right? A bit small on the screen, but I'm gonna make and just do it like that. It's how to appeal a reduced timetable. Very similar to appeals against expulsion, but just a little bit different. How to appeal a reduced timetable. And you see they have the 10 steps there. And what I want you to do, folks, is just have a quick read of either in the link, page 8, or the one that's on the screen. And I want you to tell me what's making that strong. Think about language, think about structure, think about design. Good work, folks. Um, yeah, I was gonna look through the comments. So the color coding helps. The arrows help the flow because our natural instinct is to read downwards, but the color and the arrows show us, oh, we're reading across here. So that helps. Um, the headings. I really do like the headings. The headings I think add a lot because if we just had a block of text here, but if we have a little summary here, I'm a big fan of subheadings, folks. Is what they do is they turn what can be difficult paragraphs into like easy to understand chunks. Okay, so if a person's scanning through this, and they might be reading this a couple of times, as they go through the process, as it's a very, very stressful process. But they'll find, oh, what step am I on? What's next? And they can kind of hold these kind of short headings in their heads as like the step along the way. So if you just had step one and the paragraph, it would be good, but the headings make it like a unit of information. So that thing that's very useful. They're using bullets. They're using subheadings within the section. Um, yeah. And they're trying to summarize things in the headings as much as possible. Appeals hearing within 21 days. So you might say there's a little repetition there, but I think repetition can be helpful if you're using it intentionally. It's when you're being repetitive because it's just waffle, if I can say that. That's not good. But if you're being intentionally repetitive and to be memorable, it's good. I like what they've done here in terms of step 7. So you see, when we were rewriting it, folks use it a we. But oftentimes in your roles as advocates in the charity and volunteer sector, you won't be able to use we because it'd be explaining things that the government are doing. So you won't be able to use we, but you can use a you. So if you talk directly to the people what their rights are, you can do this. So you'll get a copy of any documents the Board of Management sends to the appeals committee at least 3 days, 3 calendar days before the hearing. So they're trying to use you there. Yeah, that's an excellent point, Sharon. Thank you so much. So it's very empowering language. I would feel like I had a control influence this way as opposed to responding to the school. Yeah, that's the whole thing about active language, Sharon. It's about empowering people. Um, instead of saying an appeal can be made, you can say you can make an appeal. You can appeal. Any final thoughts or questions, folks, from looking at that? Yeah, I just think the Children's Rights Alliance there. So I'm gonna say well done to the Children's Rights Alliance. Um, Good work, folks. Okay, so the process of clear writing. I don't know why my slides have gone a bit difficult here, but there we go. So you want to have that mindset change, folks. I want to write in plain language. I want to use the techniques. I want to put my reader's needs first. Then you have to identify who you're writing for. Oftentimes we can be very vague when we don't know who we're writing for. Some of the things that I read, I have to edit, are when people aren't sure who they're writing for. So what are the audience? What are their goals? It's not what I want to tell them. It's not what the organization's needs are. It's how can I, inform the people? How can I help them with what they want to do and, with the service? Structure. As you can see, folks, structure using headings, using white space, using use good design is so important. Even before you start writing, you should be thinking about like, okay, what's the best formats for this? Also, structure can be a quick win. If you don't have time to, finesse all the writing, what you can do is you can think about adding a summary to the top, or you can add more subheadings to kind of make things easier to scan. Then the writing, famous quote is that all writing is rewriting, and I believe that because if you write a draft of it and you leave it aside for like an hour or a day, and you come back to it, you'll find ways to improve it. So writing is rewriting. And you can see design. If you have the budgets for professional designers or you have design skills yourself, you can do it. But even simpler things like using larger font, using larger headings, using good color contrasts, using appropriate images, not going overboard with the clip art. Design should really support it. And then reviewing what worked, what didn't work. In your organization, having review sessions and reviewing with your colleagues is so important because you'll build your skills and knowledge about it. And that's what we do in our training sessions. So what we're going to do, folks, is we're going to look at an example. So when I was promoting this training session or this workshop, I asked people to send me in examples, and I'm delighted to say that restorative justice services sent on an example. So we're going to take a bit of time, folks, and I'm gonna ask you to do a little bit of editing and reviewing on their leaflets. So um, There's the leaflet, folks. It's kind of a, do people say sixfold? Is that a word? Sixfold. So that's the front page on the right. Then you have the second page, the third page, the fourth page, and you go back to the previous slide. You have the back of it. Okay. So this is a leaflet that might be handed to a person who's been the victim of a crime, and it might be used for a person who's maybe the offender in a crime situation. So very difficult situation for everyone involved. Um, yeah. So it's all about that abiding empathy, folks. Okay. We want to think about the victim. We want to think about the offender, you know, and we want to, get our message across. So we're going to take a bit of time on this, folks. We're going to take a bit of time on this. I'm going to make you do the work because I want to make this interactive. And the idea is that by looking at this in depth, it'll help you reflect on your own practice because this is leaflets. You might produce leaflets, and we're gonna practice it. So what I want you to do, folks, is I want you to focus on. Yeah, I actually sent you folks this morning a little worksheet. So I'm going to put that into the chat box again. But this works best on the Word doc. So take a minute, folks, to open the Word doc that I sent you. We're going to take a bit of time with this. So take a minute to open the Word doc that I sent you. And then I'm going to talk through the task. I'm going to put in the chat box as well. Let's see if I can do that. So do me a favor, folks, open the Word doc. Maybe put an OK when you have the Word doc open with the task. That's okay. Thank you. Great. Okay. I'm delighted. I'm a bit nervous with this part, so I'm delighted that this is going well so far. Okay. Um, Thanks, Lorraine. Lorraine, the easiest, I'm trying to put it in the chat box, but it's not working for me. So the easiest thing to do is to email me and just say hi, and then I will send you it. So my email is in the chat box there. So if anyone didn't get it, just send me a quick email. That's my email in the chat, and then I'll send it to you. So what I want you to do, folks, is there's going to be three tasks to this, okay? The first one is going to be reviewing the text on restorative justice, reviewing the leaflet, and then we're going to pick out a section of it. I'm going to ask you to edit it, and then we're going to review my suggested edit. But let's do it step by step, if that's okay. So I'm going to take about 10 minutes, folks. How much time do we have? Yeah, we have half an hour. Okay, 10 minutes. Let me go to one page here. One page. I've taken the text and just put it into Word. So what am I showing you? Let's see. What am I showing you? I am showing you the middle part. I'm gonna call it the tofu, not the meat. I'll call the tofu of the leaflet, which is the main part. And I just put that into words. So what I want you to do, folks, is have a read of it. Put yourself in the shoes of uh, maybe a victim and the offender, and think about what is strong and what can be improved. Okay? Give you 10 minutes, have a read of that, and you put some notes and have a chat. Is that okay? Great, everyone. That's 10 minutes. I just want to check in and let's talk about what's strong about it. And then we'll talk about ways we can improve it or ways that jump out at you to improve it. Um, does anyone want to actually speak to it? I know it's a bit brave speaking about it, but if you raise your hand, I can unmute you and you can talk us through what you think is strong about it. Might be nice to hear another voice. Or you can just put it in the chat box. Oh, someone's put their hand up. Paula. Let me unmute you, Paula. Thank you so much. Hi, Paula. You should be able to speak now.
Hi, Sean. Thanks a million. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Paula.
Great. Well, I personally think that there's been a really good attempt at heading. The headings are quite good, I thought, and that they're in bold.
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, they are using, I think, plain language.
Mm-hmm.
They're not trying to make it complicated. They're actually trying to make it as easy as possible.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true, Paula. Very true. And yeah, so I think it is already very strong. Very true. So using headings and white space and
Mhm.
using everyday language. And were there any things that jumped out at you? You thought maybe we could improve this?
Yeah, I kind of thought, with kind of the layout of it and the design, I thought it was kind of a bit too busy, that it's kind of information overload. And I know, like, the use of a leaflet, like, for me, I didn't really know where I was meant to look first.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't look over at the left where it was actually the beginning. It wasn't clear where the beginning, middle, and end were.
Okay. Okay. So you just Paula, you were reading the leaflet, not the Word doc. You were reading the kind of the red leaflet. Was it that one or the Word doc? Let me just see if I can open that. Where's that gone? You were reading say that. Yeah, we might talk about the design in a little bit. But that's great. Thank you so much, Paula. I'm gonna ask Mark. Mark also has a hand up. I'm gonna give Mark the power to talk. So Mark, maybe you might if any other strong things or any other things you think are could be improved, please, sir. Just have to unmute Mike. You have to unmute yourself, I think. No? Do you want to have it? Go through it, Mike? No? Okay. Yeah, so let's look through the chat box, folks, and see. Let's see what we're talking about here. Let's see. Yeah, it defines what or J is. Could use a heading, so use a bullets. Makes active and passive voice. Yeah, so that's maybe a strength and a weakness. What's a forum? Use acronyms. The language could be complex or somebody in distress. No explanation of how they're going to be contacted. Clarification in separate leaflets, publications. Yeah, maybe we need more. There should be separate leaflets for 2 groups. No worries, Mark. I just saw your comment there. That's no problem. Thank you so much. Thanks, Paul. You're dropped there. I'm just going to carry on. Thank you so much. Let's see. Um, yeah, thank you so much, Sinead. That's what we're going to get to. I would like to number the actions and key elements of victim offender mediation. Flowchart for steps. Excellent. Excellent. So, folks, what I want you to do, the next step, okay? The next step is I want you to focus on this part here. See where it says key elements of victim offender mediation. And I want you to just, let's edit that. Let's edit that. Let's practice editing that and making it you and we, as Lynn says there, could use you and we. So what I have here in the work sheets. I put the whole thing there, but let's just focus on this part here, folks. Key elements of victim offender mediation. How many words is that? There's 176 words. Yeah, let's take 10 minutes, folks. I know I'm making you work here, but we're improving our skills. Let's take 10 minutes. I want you to edit that and put that in and use track changes and see if you can break it down to steps and use we and make it as simple as possible. You if you want to cut a bit of information or reframe it, but let's just focus on this part here. Key elements of victim offender mediation, this part here. And I want you to edit that and turn it into steps. Is that okay? Let's do that for 10 minutes and then we'll talk about it. We're scheduled to finish at 11:30 and we might go over a few minutes. But if you have to leave at 11:30 sharp, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for coming. If you stick around after 11:30 for a minute or two, we might just wrap things up nicely. Okay, I can share you. We can talk through it, folks. But does any brave person wanna talk through what they did, or even share their screen and show what they did? Just put your hand up if you really fancy doing that. Maybe if you want to, you'd be great. But if you don't, that's okay as well. Does anyone fancy sharing their screen and showing what they did? Talking through it? That's fair enough. Yeah, so in the chat box, folks, what would be a couple of steps you could make it? Would anyone want to type in the chat box what their steps might be? Oh, someone's put their hand up. Oh, let's see. Let's see. Paula, you want to talk? Yeah, please talk, Paula. Maybe unmute there and tell us what you did. Do I have to allow mic again? Here you go. I'll allow your mic again, Paula. So yeah, Paula, please.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Thanks. I've broken it down into steps, and I didn't get as far as putting headings on the steps, but they might be useful too. Really simplified the language. So, for example, in step 1, We refer your case to the restorative justice system before deciding on a final sanction. So taken out the acronym, which I had to look up.
Yeah.
The offender must have entered a guilty plea, or is accepting finding of guilt by the court. So I've continued with that simplified language and put it into the active voice rather than the passive voice.
Excellent.
And on step 3, so if the victim and offender agree, a mediated communication can take place. I put a heading of how does mediated communication take place for the next piece. So
Great.
those are the sorts of things I did.
Excellent.
And I think you could color code those steps as well. And again, have that in a flow chart.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much, Paula. I think what you've done there, and you identified active and passive voice. Like Word can also be very helpful. Word will show you with with blue lines where your passive voice is being used. And when I read this, I thought, is there an opportunity to use more active voice? Like what's actually happening? Who's doing the referring? Who's doing the arranging? Who's hosting the meetings? Yeah, so I'm just looking to the chat box, folks. Patricia has put her answer in there. Thank you so much, Patricia. Have a quick glance through that. Yeah. I like your third one very much. Yeah, excellent. Excellent. Great work, Patricia. Look, reading Nicole's. Yeah, sentencing, meetings, mediation, reparation panel, follow-up, headings, and removal of passive voice. Yeah, excellent. Was there any other things we can talk about before I show you my answer? Yeah, so we talked about the passive voice. There's a little bit of inconsistency just about, like, say, the courts, So the courts and the courts. We have to kind of decide what's our style. Are we going to capitalize that or not capitalize that? That's one thing to look at. In terms of jargon, so RGS. So I think we are the RGS. So maybe we could use we, and then we do explain who we are earlier. But it's an interesting point about maybe in a new section where you're going through this in detail. It can be no harm to, even though you've explained RGS at the start of it, if you explain it again, just because this is a new section, a person might be scanning just to this. So RGS can be used, but it can be a thing like where if this is like the heart of it for me, you might use the full name again and then use RGS after you've explained it once in the section. Does that make sense, Neve? Just looking through different comments, folks. Not sure exactly. I made this point 1 as there's nothing more frustrating than realizing part way through a process that doesn't apply to you. Defending the case must have. Yeah, that's a good point. Separate checks for victims and offenders. Yeah, that could work as well. Just in the text we have, how could we make it step by step? So, and there's that little section there which cut off, but okay. Oh yeah, in terms of jargon, what jumped me was final sanction is decided. And again, so I'm not a legal expert, so I'd work very, very close with the what we call the content matter experts on this, and I'd say sanction. Like, are we going to say sentencing? Is sentencing an easier word rather than sanction? Again, not a legal expert, but that'd be the question I'd be thinking. Other things I'm thinking about is, are there opportunities to use bullets here? Because when I see kind of a build up of personal responsibility effects, and there's a typo there because that's the wrong effects, which word is caught. It should be with an E. Pro-social choices, again, that strikes me as not everyday language, not something a reader would say, but something that an NGO would say. So we have to kind of try to, if we're going to use pro-social choices, what does that actually mean? Explain it, or use more everyday language. Again, more opportunities for bullet points here potentially. Reparation panel is mentioned, it's not really explained. Could we explain what the reparation panel is a bit more? Yeah, and then behind the court retains the final decision on sanction. So again, it's a short sentence, but the court retains the final decision on sanctions. Kind of hang in there. What does that mean? Who's doing it? Like, how does that apply to me? How does it apply to the victim? How does it apply to the offender? And he does go on to talk about the benefits. But when just to look at this part, so I broke it down to this, folks. So how mediation works, we break it down to 5 possible steps. Offender admits guilt. We hold planned meetings. We facilitate mediated communication. So the we is the RJS, the Restorative Justice Services. 4, offender takes part in reparation panel. We report to the courts. The court makes the final decision on sentencing. So that's there in the worksheet, folks, and that would be the approach I would take. So breaking it down, think of chunks, think about how can we make it step by step for our audience? You know, it's a good point, Deirdre. Are the mediated meetings are with who? A mediator or an RGS caseworker? So I put the we there. You know, so I thought that RGS might be strong enough. Like if we just use we and we, but it could be a good point to explain who's doing that. You know, if that's a question that comes up, maybe we need to put a sentence in like, oh, and it will be facilitated by this, you know, trained person. Another thing I thought about was that it talks about in the original about indirect versus direct communication. Again, what does that mean? Try to move away from the abstract to the concrete, you know, so this can be a phone conversation, a letter, or an in-person meeting. So try to be more direct, you know, what we're actually, you know, what are the actual things. Good question, Paula. This preparation panel is made up of, so this is my trick as an editor of putting X, Y, and Z, and then I'll put a comment and say, you know, what you just said, Paula, which is, what does that actually mean? Yeah. And Mark has put his answer in the chat box. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, good headings, referral to restorative justice system, mediated communication, meeting between victim and offender, reparation panel. Excellent. Excellent. Good work, Mark. Excellent work. Thank you so much for doing that. I'm going to have a deeper read of that. Any final questions or thoughts, folks? I thought that worked very well, considering we have 100 people in the session. And yeah, I thought that worked very well. So well done, everyone. I'm going to give you a round of applause for that. Any final questions or thoughts before we move on, just to wrap things up? Thanks, Paula. Thank you so much, Paula. Let me go back to the slides. Yeah, so folks, if you've liked today's session, what I'd encourage you to do is to join the NALA Plain English Network, because we're going to try to have more sessions like this, and we can do stuff like that. We can do things like this. We can do other topics. So that's where I communicate with Plain English members. We have 237 members, so please do join. I'm going to launch something else on April 21st. So we have 100 or so people in this session, folks, and it's great. But I want to do what we just did with the Restorative Justice Services leaflet, but do it in kind of smaller groups. So on April 21st, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of launch the NALA Content Club. So if you or your organization are working on a leaflet or a web page or something that we can like read and review within 45 minutes, we're gonna launch that. So a review session, we'll get like 15 of us together and I'll lead it and I'll talk through the rules of, critiquing each other's work. And then we'll just do that. We'll do kind of 2 in about 90 minutes. Oh no, 75 minutes. So we'll do 2 in 75 minutes. So that's the idea. Keep an eye on the website for that. And you'll be encouraged to get involved. You'll be, you can present yourself on what you want feedback on, or you can just be a participant. So we're going to do that on April 21st. We're going to do it in the morning. We're going to do 2 sessions. Will you be sending us your simplified version for comparison? I will, Paula, but you have it in the worksheet. It's in the worksheet, so you already have it. Yeah, so I'm gonna say, if you have any questions, folks, put them in the chat box. And I'm just going to wrap things up because I don't want to go past the time. So there's an evaluation I'm going to send on after this. Please do fill it out and what you liked and what you didn't like. And if you want further events, what topics you want. It looks something like that. Yeah, you can get in contact with me. I have my email. I'm going to give a shout out to Derv if she wants to say anything, or Aoife. But I'll stick around, folks, for a question and answer. If someone puts a question in the chat box, I'm going to answer it. But thanks for your time, folks, and good luck with all the work. But I'm going to say thank you, and I'm going to answer the questions people have put in.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, just if anybody does want to follow up with me about literacy-friendly training for your organisation, we'll put my contact details in the follow-up email. So please do get in contact about that. And thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, folks. So I'm going to go through the questions and I'm going to answer them as best as I can. But it's been great to be in your presence today. So Aoife, what's the process of getting accreditation for plain English for your organization? Yeah, so I can send you an email about that, Aoife, and go through the process. But basically, we have editing services and we have training services. So the editing services, you email me or my colleague Claire, and you send us the draft of what you're working on, and we'll read it. If it's very, very long, we'll read 20% of it, and then we'll give you a quote on how we think how much it'll cost us and the time it'll take to do the work in terms of applying the plain English guidelines. We've 2 services, just an edit, or then a plain English mark, which is an edit and review where we have a quality control where other editors will look at it. So the first step is just to email us with the documents that you have or the web text, and we'll read it to give you a quote. The mission of Plain English is to empower you to feel that you can do the Plain English editing. But yeah, if you want editing support, we can help you with that. Hope that's okay, Aoife. Would you recommend any color change? Yeah, Tatiana, I might send you some notes, Tatiana, about the leaflets. I was gonna go back to the design element of it, but I kind of lost track of time. So let me open this up real quick. Yeah, I'll send you more feedback in an email, Tatiana, but what jumps out at me is that the color scheme is okay. I think red can be a bit hard for some readers though, so I might use a different color because I think red is a difficult color for people who may have color blindness. But the fact that it's not contrasting with anything green is okay. In terms of design, I'm not a professional designer, but I'd look at the plain English guidelines are that you'd look at like maybe not using italics, maybe using more subheadings, avoiding large blocks of bold. But I think the design is already quite clear. I think you're keeping it as simple as possible. So I'll send you some feedback on that. But in terms of color, I don't know, I'm not a designer, but I think the red is working okay. Like you can see here, they're using red like that. So it's they use red sparingly. So you could color code it to some degree. But that's not, yeah, hope that was okay, Tatiana. I should thank Tatiana for sending on that example because it really made the session. So thank you so much. Any other questions, folks? Let's see. If space is tight on the leaflet, what can you do? So I think that's a good point, Anya, about space being tight on leaflets. But you have to remember that like we're trying to say everything, but we have to think about what does our reader need. So if you set yourself word counts, and if you are very strict with your word counts, then that'll help you be disciplined about what you're actually going to include. So I would say be very disciplined. You can always cut. I was doing a training session with an organization and they said, Sean, we're always saying our key messages in every communication and people stop reading them. So you just have to think like, don't have too much in your message because it will get lost. So that's what I'd say, just think about try to be as concise as possible and put the reader's needs first rather than the organization's because that's what happens, makes things very long. And maybe a leaflet isn't the best, if it isn't the best thing, maybe a short leaflet with a QR code leading to a web page that can help as well. A shorter leaflet QR code leading to a more in-depth web page that could be something that could be more accessible for people. Okay, is that the last question, folks? Any other questions? I'll try to answer them, but it's been a pleasure. What's the best font to use? Isn't Times New Roman harder? Yeah, so you can see that's a great point. So we didn't even talk about that, but you see the original here, they're using Times New Roman. So Times New Roman is considered to be a very professional font, but it's quite hard to read. Why do people not like Times New Roman? Well, you see these things at the bottom here, the or, they're called serifs. So we do all our reading now, folks, basically online and digitally, and how people read online is affecting how they're reading in print. So what people use nowadays is the sans serif fonts. So a good place to go for information on this is the NDA's toolkit, which I'm going to open now. So the Customer Communications Toolkit has great advice about design. So if you open this, which I'll send you links to after the session, and you go to, I know where it is, but if you just look at document design, it'll show you examples of different fonts. And the short answer is you want to aim for a sans serif font. What does that mean? Well, it means fonts without those things at the end. Those are called serifs. So all these ones here, you'll see there's no little squiggles at the end. They're considered to be cleaner. So we use Arial and Calibri. There's lots of other ones like Tahoma, Verdana, but you just, whatever your house one is, use that. But generally nowadays, they're all sans serif fonts like Arial and Calibri. Yeah, people think Times New Roman is hard to read, Sharon. Still gets used in the legal profession, I'd say a lot. Or the guards use it a lot, but yeah, the general guidance is to use sans serif fonts. So yes, the NDA's toolkit will show you how, this is an easy font to read, this is hard to read. So it gives you very good indicative examples. Okay, thanks for sticking around, folks. If you have any questions, please do put in the chat box. Otherwise, yeah, I'm just gonna hang out here. Is it okay? I'm going to end the meeting, folks. I'm going to formally close the meeting and just thank you all again. Yeah, take care. Bye-bye.